We've learned about an abandoned mercury mine near the Russian River, highly toxic and forgotten until now.
First, a warning. Our next story contains graphic images of children and adults severely disabled by mercury poisoning. It may be disturbing to some viewers.
Major environmental concerns over mercury contamination at extensive gold mining operations in the remote regions of the Peruvian Amazon.
In Western Kenya, gold mining is a way of making a living. On informal mines right across the region, women often use mercury in order to extract the gold. But a recent study conducted by a network of international charities has found that this chemical could be slowly killing them and affecting the wider community too.
Small-scale gold mining is widespread throughout the developing world. It is one of the biggest sources of mercury pollution on Earth. The health effects of this heavy metal are dramatic and deadly.
Mercury is cheap, it's terrible for the environment, and it's not good for anything except pretty effective at catching gold.
The United Nations Environment Program estimates that small-scale miners use up to 1,350 tons of mercury each year, making it the single largest use of mercury worldwide. It takes 2 ounces of mercury to produce a single ounce of gold.
Mercury is a terrific element. It's really interesting because it's so complex. It's the only element that exists as a liquid at room temperature, but it also exists in a gaseous form.
Mercury is found primarily in a red rock known as cinnabar. When it settles in waterways, bacteria transform it into a form known as methylmercury. That's the kind that Flegel is most concerned about. Methylmercury is highly toxic and is easily absorbed by tiny aquatic organisms.
It can be bioaccumulated, which means at each trophic level in the food chain, the concentration gets higher. And methylmercury then is picked up in plants and is picked up in the organisms that eat the plants. And as you move up the food chain to bigger and bigger organisms, you get more and more mercury.
Mercury remains relatively harmless until the process of methylation occurs. Methylmercury, a neurotoxin, works its way into the food chain, accumulating in ever larger, ever more harmful quantities in ever larger organisms.
Mercury, and only mercury, causes the breakdown and depolymerization of tubulin off of the neurofibril, producing neurofibrillary tangles, which is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Not only that, but published studies repeatedly show that the widespread exposure of mercury and its effects on the brain explains every single aspect of Alzheimer's disease. It is the missing piece of the puzzle that's been literally right under the noses of researchers for all these years.
It's well understood to be a highly dangerous substance, but when it's released into our atmosphere, into our waterways, gets into the food system, and not just stays in the food system, biomagnifies is the term. It gets worse.
Gold is maybe the most universal shorthand there is for value and for greed. The ancient Egyptians were obsessed with it, European explorers marauded through South America in search of it, and American cities like San Francisco and Seattle rose to prominence because of it. It's a big part of our history as humans. Looking at all that, our obsession with gold also seems historical, sort of old-timey. But that's not at all true. There's still huge demand for gold today. The recession of 2008 helped gold quadruple in value, and a full half of all the gold mined in the world has been mined in the past 50 years alone.
Gold is one of the most precious metals in the world and has run the gamut from its use as currency to jewelry and even electronic plating and infrared shielding, but for many people the cost far outweighs its intrinsic value.
In the heart of the Peruvian Amazon lies a man-made desert. It was once pristine rainforest, but a decade of illegal gold mining has transformed it into a wasteland. Peru is the 7th largest gold producer in the world. The US imports around $2 billion worth a year, despite the fact that an estimated 20% of it is illegally mined in places like the Madre de Dios region. It's a sparsely inhabited jungle the size of Indiana, along Peru's borders with Bolivia and Brazil. Gold extraction isn't illegal everywhere in Madre de Dios, but is never allowed inside national reserves or the buffer zones around them. Government officials estimate that as many as 40,000 illegal miners have occupied these areas, clearing trees, digging pits, and infusing the ground with mercury. The toxic chemical draws the precious gold out of the sand and dirt, but is then left behind, poisoning the landscape. Peru's part of the Amazon alone makes up the fourth largest tropical rainforest in the world. It's a biodiversity hotspot, home to species found nowhere else. But the destruction of this precious resource has been accelerating.
Small, artisanal gold mines can be found on every continent, often in remote regions of unstable countries.
In response to the growing demand for gold, the number of illegal mines has exploded, and mercury pollution has become an increasingly dire problem. Illegal mining brings in an estimated $2.5 billion every year and has become more profitable than cocaine trafficking for armed groups in Colombia, who either run or tax mining operations. Per kilo, gold is worth more than cocaine, and it's easier to trade since it's a legal commodity. It's why young men like Didier Perea have flocked to these mines in the hopes of hitting it big.
Últimamente se forma ya como en un negocio porque hay minas que uno empieza a trabajarlas y últimamente sale un mínimo muy bueno. Entonces ya se convierte como casi en una adicción.
¿En una adicción?
Como prácticamente una adicción porque uno muele y hay veces uno lava lo que es un coco es un baldado de minas.
Sí.
Entonces lo lava uno y ese baldado le da a uno, por ejemplo, que es 5 millones de pesos, 3, 4, entonces uno se anima mucho.
But these miners are working on borrowed time. This type of small-scale mining uses mercury to separate the gold from other materials, which means constant contact with an element so toxic that even low levels of exposure can do damage to the nervous system. And chronic mercury poisoning can cause organ failure and even death. The method has been banned in the United States for more than a century.
Right here is the first step of introducing mercury into the whole gold mining process. So it's really here where the contamination starts.
Este es el mercurio.
Dale.
Si no está el mercurio, el oro no recoge.
No se pega.
No se pega el oro.
Claro.
Si usted no le echa, usted que le toca, no le echa esto, nada hace.
¿Y para el mercurio no usan protección, ni guantes, ni nada?
No,
nada. ¿Y no les ha perjudicado? ¿No les ha perjudicado la salud?
No. Porque no tomo mucha leche.
Entonces, lo que te quería preguntar es, ¿qué has sentido de síntomas, digamos?
En estos momentos muchos temblores como síntomas de taquicardia. Por ejemplo, los nervios nunca están activos como es debido. Siempre hay alteraciones, ¿sí? Alteraciones virtuales. La mayoría a las 24 horas. Entonces, como es un mercurio, él va tocando toda la base. El problema es que no le ponemos como cuidado. Y el momento que sí, que pierde de pronto, comienza a perder pérdida de cabello, según como se vaya experimentando. Listo, que va perdiendo de pronto la visibilidad sensual.
¿Esto es común, lo que tú sientes? ¿Crees que hay otra gente que está sintiendo lo mismo que ustedes comentan de pronto, que tienen varios los mismos síntomas? La tembladera, la falta de memoria.
Por ejemplo, dentro de esta comunidad, muchos sufrimos de esos problemas.
Ever since Judith Okello-Otana got the shakes, the simple things, like holding a cup of water, have become almost impossible.
I cannot bathe, and I cannot handle anything well with my hands because they are weak. I try to drink a lot of water and milk. Sometimes I feel better, but mostly I shiver.
These are typical symptoms of mercury poisoning, and she is not alone. On informal gold mines like Osiri in western Kenya, women have been complaining of similar traits.
28 children living in or near gold mining hotspots suffered from multiple health issues, including neurological problems, bone deformities, seizures, vision loss, deafness, and paralysis. Since the research was conducted, 3 of the children died. This is Naimis. She lives in Sulawesi, Indonesia. Just 8 years old, she has the body of an emaciated toddler and severe brain damage. Her head is massively oversized. She suffers from hydrocephalus, a buildup of fluid in the brain. Caring for her is a struggle. Her mother actually chews her food for her before pushing the grains of rice to the child's mouth. But it's not just children. Tahunda is 45 years old.
This man was a healthy farmer living here, doing some mining work like crushing ore. And then a couple of years ago he started to become sick. He felt that he can't coordinate his movements anymore, that he can't walk properly anymore.
His condition worsens by the month.
This man has a severe neurological disease. It disables him in daily life, so he has problems to follow daily routines.
Your kidneys can fail, your heart can fail, your liver can fail, and other systems can fail. Your muscles can also fail. One system that gets affected in a major way is the central nervous system. The brain, all the way to all the nerves in the body, get damaged.
They work over 12-hour days by the sluicing pools, and it is here where they come into contact with mercury, using the chemical to earn their $2 per gold extraction. Many, like Maria Cheng, are unaware of the health effects of mercury. It is a simple technique to extract gold and earn their living, but it could be slowly killing them, and affecting their children, as Eunice Atieno has discovered.
Other children labor underground, unfortunately well suited for this grueling labor.
This former advisor to the United Nations on mercury has spent years on the problem.
It's going up every year because the poverty in rural areas is increasing. Gold price is still good, and it's a big opportunity for the poor.
We are currently dying to live because we are poisoning ourselves.
In terms of looking after children and unborn babies, I would rate it as extremely serious because it's not an unknown. Mercury will damage children. It does it terribly well. That's the disaster of mercury.
The walls are contaminated, the surface, those blankets, the miner, the floor, essentially every square inch of this place is covered in mercury.
The most dangerous form of mercury pollution comes from the final stage of gold production, when the mercury is burned off, releasing its vapors into the atmosphere.
So this is a situation where I came around the corner and my tongue was getting numb and I could tell something was being burnt and this guy was just burning an amalgam. I got mercury poisoning 2 or 3 times.
While scary, Nichols' exposure was low compared to the workers who spend years breathing in the toxic gas created by burning off the mercury.
They're breathing 1,000,000 times over the recommended concentration and just saturating their bodies with it.
It's a global problem. In developing countries in Asia, Africa, and South America, small-scale mining is putting thousands of tons of mercury into the environment. It can be disastrous.
According to tests conducted in the area, mercury levels are 50 times safe levels recommended by the United Nations.
Es grave la cuestión del mercurio en todas estas zonas porque nos dicen que sí está afectando bastante la salud.
Mira, para darte una idea, en las zonas donde no hay intervención del ser humano, las zonas selváticas, por ejemplo, el sur de Colombia, el Amazonas, En esas zonas donde no hay introducción del hombre, los niveles de mercurio en el ambiente son prácticamente menores de 5 nanogramos por litro de aire, o sea, son prácticamente mínimos. En ciudades como Bogotá o Medellín, los niveles llegan hasta 18-20. En ciudades como Remedios y Segovia, llega hasta 940 nanogramos por litro en los espacios abiertos. Y hasta hay datos que muestran hasta 400.000 nanogramos por litro en espacios encerrados. O sea, estamos ante una exposición bastante alta. Y estamos inhalando y estamos absorbiendo el mercurio permanentemente.
An estimated 100 tons of mercury run off from sites like this in Antioquia into the rivers every year.
Australia's historic gold mines used a similar process and dumped hundreds of tons of mercury into rivers.
When you take a mining operation and you put it on top of a mountain, the water, as we all know, only follows gravity. It goes down in every direction.
Eating too much fish might cause a buildup of mercury. Mercury builds up in the bodies of smaller fish, which get eaten by bigger fish, so the mercury starts building up there, and then that fish is eaten by an even bigger fish, then they get even more mercury, and so on and so forth up the food chain. This process is called bioaccumulation. So mercury bioaccumulates in bigger fish like shark or swordfish, which wind up with pretty big doses of the toxin. But even more common fish like tuna and salmon can accumulate decent doses too.
Mercury levels in fish have not been considered high, but dolphins which eat up to 10 kilograms of fish a day have been found dead with high levels of mercury.
Richard Gutierrez is the founder and director of Ban Toxics, an organization in the Philippines dedicated to preventing the trade of toxic chemicals.
It's a heavy metal. It's persistent, therefore it bioaccumulates in the food chain. It bioaccumulates in the seafood. So it's poisoning, it's contaminating, a major protein source for a lot of people. It also travels further. So it has the capability of global transport. The contamination is not restricted in one site.
Few would suspect that this poisonous element is also at the root of California's history and prosperity. In the 19th century, mercury was used extensively in the gold rush, and the best place to find mercury was in the cinnabar-rich hills just south of San Jose in a town called New Almaden.
What is unique of this mine was there was no other working mercury mine anywhere in North America. 1848, they discovered gold. 49 was the gold rush. So now when California needed mercury for the gold mines, here was a locally close by source of mercury. This is a piece of pure cinnabar here, very high grade. Sometimes there were walls that were 30 feet tall and nothing but solid cinnabar deposited in these hills. And like a little bit like gold, this was hitting pay dirt when you found this type of high grade ore in that kind of quantity.
To extract mercury, crushed ore was heated in furnaces to about 1200 degrees. The high temperatures transformed the mercury into a vapor. As the gas cooled and condensed, it turned into a liquid form known as quicksilver.
They would weigh out 76 pounds of it in a liquid or in a metal container called a flask, and then it was always tagged at 99.9% pure.
Mercury is naturally attracted to gold, and Sierra miners put it to work separating the precious metal from crushed rock. By the early 1900s, miners had switched to cyanide to extract gold. But mercury still had many uses in industry, medicine, dentistry, and common household products.
Most mining operations are short-lived, the ore runs out, but this was mined from 1845 until 1976. And the riches that were taken out of these hills. They took out more metallic wealth out of these hills than any gold or silver mine.
All that wealth left behind a legacy in the form of mercury mining waste. Rocky deposits from the old furnaces are leaching mercury into the creeks and rivers that are part of the South Bay's Guadalupe watershed. Mercury-tainted sediment can also be found throughout the Sierra Nevada, San Pablo Bay, and the Delta. Their contaminated waters all drain into San Francisco Bay.
The problem with mercury is it's not just a historic pollutant. It is the major inorganic environmental pollutant being put into the environment now.
Mercury travels through the air, too.
Mercury was essential to the process of separating gold from ore, and as chance would have it, a source was close at hand. In the hills above San Francisco Bay, near San Jose, the new Almaden mine would become the largest mercury mine in North America.
We have mines in the coast ranges that are the cinnabar mines, mercury sulfide mines where the mercury was mined, and there's mining that was done in the Sierra Nevada region where that purified elemental mercury was used to extract gold and silver. The Bay is still currently getting inputs from both of these types of mining regions.
Today, the new Almaden mine's legacy endures in the name of the region's newspaper and the mercury-laden sediments of the Guadalupe River that flow into San Francisco Bay. By the end of the 19th century, as much as 8 million pounds of mercury from new Almaden and the hydraulic operations in the Sierra Nevada were unleashed into the rivers of the San Francisco Bay watershed.
It's actually amazing how well distributed mercury is. You can measure mercury pretty much everywhere we look.
We asked the EPA why no action was taken in 1989. They sent us this statement. Though mercury was found, these waters were not consumed. The site did not qualify for the national priorities list and was given a no further remedial action planned.
But I'm glad that you were dogged enough to pursue this, over many months. It's a slow process. These federal agencies and state agencies, they move like with glacial speed. I know, I used to work there.
Russian Riverkeeper did their own small test of striped bass in the river 10 years ago. All the fish had mercury levels well over the EPA limit, but the state has not posted any warnings along the river. Studies have shown that eating contaminated fish poses a significant health risk.
Catching fish was a supplement to our diet, and since we didn't have a lot of money, eating fish was probably better than what we could buy in the grocery store. It's a big difference. And it's kind of sad that today the kids are told, everyone's told, don't eat too many of the fish, they're too toxic with mercury. There are fish advisories about almost all the water in the United States. I think it's sad. Why go fish if you can't eat the fish you're catching? You're catching something that's toxic. Why? It just takes the romance and the livelihoodness out of it. And I think we should do everything we can to get our water and air clean again. That means we have to stop all kinds of mercury. We can't blame just one group.